Hey everybody, it's Tao at the Forge, and today I made kind of a mistake, but it kind of worked out okay, and I decided to make a video about it because my loss should be your gain. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about this College Cup Test of Knowledge. Now, normally I would never play something like this because you have to pay gold to get into it. It's like 2,500 gold. I would never pay gems to get into it, okay? But then you only win card styles. All right. So I was looking at it. I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh, okay, I should exit. And then I don't know what happened, but I accidentally clicked join or play or register or whatever. Right. And so I was like, God, now I'm like out money. Like I lost my gold and I'm already in. I can't refund it. So then I guess I had to go make a deck. All right. So I had to go play this. Right. Because if I'm in, I'm in. All right. So the first thing I did is I tried to play my mono black Singleton deck, right? And that was just a nightmare, okay? And I realized that it's because of the nature of this that you're just not going to win with a creature-based deck, all right? Namely because, like, let's take a look at this, all right? So the first thing is that in this event, the spells will be flying fast and furious whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery. So you get to draw a card, right? So what you really want to do is you want to be casting almost always instants and sorceries. So then my opponent's like, if you're casting creatures, you just run out of cards. And so I was like, okay, well, what kind of deck is going to do that, right? Well, a mill deck, right? So think about it. You get to draw lots of cards. You want to punish your opponent for drawing cards, all right? And then basically you want to just cast all instants and sorceries, which is basically like all a mill deck does, right? There's like very few creatures in it, so almost everything you do is going to gain you cards. All right, so anyways, let's take a look and see what I came up with. Now, I was able to get an easy 4-0. I kept playing a little while afterwards. I played maybe like 10 to 15 games of this, and I would say, my win rate is probably about 80 to 85%. All right, so I'm doing very good using a mill deck on this. All right, so anyways, let's go and see. I've refined it a bit, but here we go. Actually, so there we go. All right, so what we're trying to do is quickly establish a board presence and just control the crap out of our opponent. So mainly, we have to have things like mill enablers, counter spells, and creature removal for anything that our opponent might get down. All right. So let's take a look. We've got one concerted defense. So counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1 plus an additional 1 for each creature in your party. Now, this is not going to be that great, but it's a 1-mana spell that can give you a counter early on, right? And sometimes, we do have some creatures. We do have a wizard in here, so sometimes it can be like, unless they pay 2. Right, we've got Merfolk Secretkeeper, which I don't really care about the body on it. I guess the body could be a blocker eventually, but I really just want the sorcery to target player mills 4 cards. And when you cast this, it replaces itself, so that's good. You can cast this turn 1, get some cards in the graveyard, and replace yourself. Okay, we got Miscast, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3. You got Opt, which is just going to replace itself, so you get to scry 1 and draw a card, but because it's an instant, you draw another card again. Right, you got Overwhelmed Apprentice, and this is our wizard, right? So when Overwhelmed Apprentice enters the battlefield, each opponent mills 2 cards, and then you scry 2. That scry 2 is super helpful, right? Because you're drawing so many cards that it's nice to be able to like see to kind of get what you need, right? Okay, we got Rune Crab. I have actually not, in none of my games did I ever use Rune Crab. And when I had a chance to cycle it out, like with, I had to discard to Teferi's Tutelage, which I'll show you guys later, I always discarded the Rune Crab. So, I mean, it's okay if you get it in your opening hand. It'd be pretty nice to start milling your opponent and put some pressure on them. But, late game, this is, not really going to be amazing. All right. Bloodchief's Thirst. Okay, it's just a 1-mana destroy target creature, or it can destroy planeswalkers, which is super important. We've got Anticognition, 2-mana, counter target creature or planeswalker, unless their opponent pays 2. And if they have 8 or more cards in the graveyard, instead you just counter it, which they're probably going to have, and then you scry 2. Okay, we got Disdainful Stroke, 2 mana. You can see we have a crap ton of 2 mana counter spells. Counter target spell with mana value 4 or greater. We have Jawari Disruption, which can be a land, right, as well. So if you're short land, you can always put this down, right? But counter target spell, unless this controller pays 1. We got basically all the counter spells. Lofty Denial, we don't have any flyers, so it's going to always be counter target spell unless controller pays 1. You want to get this out as soon as possible because, like, in the late game, your opponent's going to have, like, 8 to 10 mana, and so this is going to be kind of useless. But your opponent will almost always tap out all their mana, right? So there is a time when you can use this. Okay, Maddening Cacophony. Now, I almost never count this with Kicker, or play this with Kicker, because by the time you have 6 mana, like, then basically, you're already, like, you're gonna mill your opponent out like crazy anyways. So don't try and even bother casting this with the Kicker. Just cast it for 2, right? And then each opponent mills 8 cards. And the thing is, by the time you have like 6 mana or whatever you need, like, you kind of have to go like shields down, like, for the next round in order to get this, and that only mills half their library. Yeah, it's good, but I've never really particularly loved this card, but milling 8 for 2 is pretty good. Okay, then on top of that we got Negate. Now here's one of our win conditions: Ominous Seas. So whenever you draw a card, put a foreshadow counter on Ominous Seas, remove 8 foreshadow counters, and then create an 8/8 blue Kraken. Well, at the beginning of your turn, you get to draw a card. But every time you cast an instant or sorcery, you get to draw a card. So when you're countering your opponent's spells, you get to draw a card, right? When you cast an opt, you're drawing a card, and then another card, right? So this Ominous Seas will get huge really, really fast, and then you're just throwing out 8/8 Krakens, right? Which is going to put a ton of pressure on your opponent. Okay, we got Sweet Oblivion, so target player mills 4 cards, and then what are you going to do with all those cards in your graveyard? Well, you can just exile 4 other cards from your graveyard and play this again, right? It counts as a sorcery. It helps you to draw a card, which puts another thing on Ominous Seas, and so on and so forth. So, like, Sweet Oblivion is freaking amazing here. Okay, then after that we got Eliminate and Heartless Act, both just creature removal for 2 mana. Right, we got Drown in the Lock, which is counterspell and creature removal. It takes a little bit of time to get this going, but it's actually, I've never really had a problem with it. I haven't regretted having it. Okay, we have Cancel. Here's our regular 3 mana counterspell. Sweet. Cancel, Convolute, Didn't Say Please, Mystical Dispute, right? And we do have a wizard, right? So, very often you're going to be playing blue spells because people want to be casting a lot of instants and sorceries in this one. So yeah, anyway, so you can often just counter this spell for 1 mana. Okay, Midnight Clock. If you can get this down at some point, now don't go shields down to put this down. Okay, but at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an hour counter on it. If your opponent doesn't play anything, you can just tap and put an hour counter on it, and so on and so forth, and then eventually just refill your hand. Okay, although this one, I would say Midnight Clock is not really necessary. This could be replaced with another counter spell or another creature destruction spell if we really need it. Although I haven't found that I really needed it very much. Okay, Saw It Coming is just another counter spell. Okay, another one of our winning conditions is Teferi's Tutelage. So once we can get this down, then every time we counter a spell, we draw a card and our opponent mills 2 cards, and it's going to be just really hard for our opponent to keep up. Because of this constant card draw, we can just keep drawing and drawing and drawing, and there's nothing our opponent can really do. We just never run out of gas, right? So just constantly counterspell them. Okay, we got Whirlwind Denial. For each spell and ability your opponents control, counter it unless its controller pays 4. Then we got some more creature removal with Elspeth's Nightmare, right? So you can put this down, destroy a small creature your opponent has. Then they reveal their hand. You can discard a card from them. Then you can exile their graveyard, right? Now, what's better than having like Teferi's Tutelage? Being able to look for Teferi's Tutelage. And if you have Teferi's Tutelage, you can use this to look for one of our other win conditions, namely you can use that to look for Ominous Seas, or I'll show you guys later, Underworld Dreams. All right, so this one I've never really, again, haven't really ever regretted having Grim Tutor in here. It's definitely worth it to have this in there. Okay, and we got some more creature removal. So we got Murderous Rider. Again, I don't really care about the body that much. Like, if I have the mana, I'll put the body down, but usually I don't. I just usually want to hold up the counter spells that I have. So like I play the instant or sorcery side of these cards, but I almost never play the bodies. All right, they got Mythos of Nethroi, which is destroy target non-land permanent if it's a creature. Okay, and we don't have the green or white, so we just can't destroy anything else, but only creatures. But we can pretty much counter everything else that's not a creature. Okay, if your opponent somehow gets like some small creatures down, we can use Pestilence Haze to get rid of them. And then here's the thing. Our opponent is also going to be drawing cards like crazy, so why not punish them? Right, so we have Underworld Dreams. Right, so whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to them, and we just do not want this against us. So do not let your opponent put this down against you, otherwise you're just totally screwed. Right, so far I've only seen one person play this, and I don't know why. This is such a good card in here, or in this format, because people are just drawing cards like crazy. Okay, after that we've got our 4 mana counter spells and control type stuff. So we've got Memory Drain, so counter target spells, scry 2, and because you are drawing like so many cards, you can just scry the lands that you might not need to the bottom and just draw into more counters. We got Rewind, which is counter target spell, untap up to 4 lands, and then likely you're going to draw another counter spell or removal, right? And then you have the 4 lands ready to go for your next one. So this is actually really sweet as well. Okay, we got Bake Into a Pie. Now, I would have chosen a different, like a cheaper removal, but there's not really any cheaper removal, so Bake Into a Pie is going to have to work. We got Hagra Mauling as well, which is also a pretty good one. There's never going to be a time when our opponent controls no basic lands, because this format again just has you drawing so many cards, and in Singleton, like, there's no way they're not playing basic lands. So you know you're always going to be casting this for 4, but still it's an instant speed. It draws you another card and removes a creature. Sublime Epiphany is the bee's knees in this deck, right? Like you're always going to be able to get up to 6 mana, but sometimes like your opponent has something that's really tricky in their deck, like they have like a Thassa Deep Dwelling or something like that, and you can return that to your opponent's hand. So what you do is you wait for them to get the spell down, and then when they try and cast something else, then you counter that spell, then you return that thing to their hand, right? And then you're not going to have any creatures to make copies of, but then you can also draw a card as well. So you usually use 3 of these modes, right? It's actually super, super sweet, right? So anyways, this one is an amazing card in here and just can wreck people, right? Then we got Magic Mirror. So because we have so many instants and sorceries that we're casting, we can almost always get this out for 3, right? So you have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a knowledge counter on the Magic Mirror. Then you can draw a card for each knowledge counter on Magic Mirror, right? So then it just keeps us drawing more cards, which is more counter spells. When we're drawing more cards, then we're getting more Teferi's Tutelage triggers in, and then we can just wreck our opponent again. Right, and after that we just have our lands. So basically you just have a crap ton of dual lands. We have Castle Vantress, so it allows us to scry Mystic Sanctuary to put an instant or sorcery back on top of our library, which is actually really, really strong. Snow-covered islands, I just put them in there to mess with my opponent, but we actually don't care about snow-covered anything. Okay, Castle Lochthwain. Now, Castle Lochthwain is I actually am considering taking this out, because you're going to be drawing so many cards that you never are going to be empty-handed, right? And so I actually don't think that we need this in. Just maybe take this out and put in like just another swamp. All right, so let's take that out and just throw in another swamp. Okay, then we got Witch's Cottage, Clearwater Pathway, Dismal Backwater, Ice Tunnels, and Temple of Deceit. Right, and that's our whole land package right there. Right, it's a fairly simple one to play. Basically, it's going to be just draw, go, you know, just counter things until your opponent gives up, you know, and then eventually when you have enough mana, or if you can do it early enough, put down like if you can put down Ominous Seas on turn 2, that's freaking amazing, right? And then you can just deal with whatever your opponent gets down, right? Like, you know, it's probably not going to be anything huge, right? And then especially if you can get down to Teferi's Tutelage or even Underworld Dreams, and you can just wreck face with those. So far, anyways, that's the deck. I've found it to be extremely useful. Right, it's got a very high win rate. The times when I lost, I primarily lost because like Arena gave me one lander, so I mulliganed, gave me another one lander, I mulliganed, gave me another one lander, and then I end up losing that one. Yeah, other than that, one of the other ones, my opponent was basically playing this very similar thing where they played Ominous Seas on turn 2, and I didn't have it. I had no way to counter it. And then after that, it was just a straight up counter versus counters type game, and eventually, because this just relies on card draw, you don't even have to actually cast anything, then eventually you just create an 8/8 Kraken against me and beat me. Right, so that's just kind of luck of the draw in that one if you're playing a mirror match. But anyways, let me tell you, this deck is super fun to play, not fun for your opponent, easy to play as well. It's just basically draw and wait for your opponent to go on their turn, and it's basically counter anything of consequence, right? Anything of consequence for them, just counter it. All right. Anyways, that is it for the video. Let me know what you think, and give it a shot. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.